Welcome to the Best Known Church Show, where we show you how to 10x your reach with church marketing that will help you increase your impact, make more disciples, and become the cornerstone of your community again. This is for the leaders with an outrageous vision, because anything less would be an inaccurate reflection of our Creator. The ones who have unreasonable faith, because you know God works unreasonable miracles. And the ones who are relentless in the pursuit of your calling, because anything less would not make a good and faithful servant. If that's you, you're in the right place. Now, please welcome your host and guide on this journey to become the best known organization in your community, Justin Nava.
What's going on, everybody? Happy day. Whatever day you're working on, listening to this, commuting, driving, working with this on the background. I'm glad to have you here. Glad that whatever you're doing, you're spending this time improving your ministry, your church, your efforts, your kingdom work. God bless you for watching this. And let me start with this. You know, first of all, this is pre-recorded. The last few, May's been a crazy month. 3 trips in the month and all of them in the middle of the week. So a lot of the last few shows have been pre-recorded, and I apologize for that. I really want to do these live, but when it comes to doing it live or keeping a consistent time, I would rather keep the consistent time. It's kind of like, you know, if pastor's traveling, if you're going out and you're going to be gone for the weekend, you don't move the entire church service to a different day and time, right? You get someone else to step in, but thanks to the miracle of technology and the tools that we have, I can do a simulated live, and I do that through website called Live Pigeon. There's a lot of websites that do it. If your church is part of Subsplash, they have that ability too, where you can upload a pre-recorded video and then it streams it as if it was live. I don't like to do pre-recorded lives in this kind of thing because I want there to be interaction in the comment section. I want folks to see this. So instead, while you're watching this, I will be in a conference talking about metaverse and the church. And I'm very excited for this one, and it'll be in Kansas City. So I'm very excited to be a part of that. But I don't want another week to go by without you having the answers that I brought to the questions I brought up last week. Last time we talked about branding, the logos, what makes a good church logo, and kind of realized I put a little bit of the cart before the horse. And before you get to the actual design of the logo, of it being memorable, of it being recognizable, of it being an accurate reflection of yourself and something that you can easily print and use in black and white and all that stuff, you need to kind of know what questions to ask when you go into this logo redesign process. And there's even more stuff that I'm just thinking of right now that, you know, maybe some questions to ask before you get into the process. So it's almost like we're working backwards here. But if you decide, hey, we need a new church logo, you know, it's not that many questions that you have to ask. Do we need a church logo? First of all, is it something that looks good? Okay. There's a lot of logos that we like you and me on an individual level may say that doesn't look good. However, in a modern general sense, it looks good. Most church logos do not, in a modern general sense, look good. They look outdated. They look old. They use clip art. They use old script handwriting. God forbid papyrus. That was fun to say. God forbid papyrus. I'm going to put that on a shirt. And, you know, it's we can tell that it's time for an update. So there are specific questions that we can ask. However, if you're watching this, you pretty much have already decided or are thinking about a logo redesign. And kudos to you. What I don't want you to do is make the same mistake a past client of mine had made. This was when I was with my previous agency. A church had come to us and said, hey, we need a new logo. We went through a few designers, got some options, finally figured out what we wanted, and then went with it, paid for the project, all that good stuff. And this is, mind you, multiple designers. And then they finally approved it, went to launch it, and the board did not like it. And the board essentially overruled the leaders who chose the logo. And basically they had to go back to square one with a new set of rules that they had to follow. Now, I don't want you to be like those guys where you're constantly, I mean, no church needs to go through 20 logos. If anyone ever tells you, by the way, Pastor, hey, yeah, I'll make you some logos. I'll shoot you over 10. Or Pastor, if you say, hey, can you make me like a dozen logos and send, anyone who says yes to that request or offers that is not a logo. They're not a brand artist. They're not a brand strategist. They're a logo maker. I would barely even call it a logo designer because design implies intent. If they're going to shoot over 12 logos, you're just picking something that looks pretty, right? You're not actually going with the intent of what the logo should do. And like we talked about last week, a logo is your visual representation of your church. It is your identity as you represent yourself, whether you go out in person or whether you're represented even through a sign or a graphic or a social media profile. That logo needs to say, hey, this is that church and here's what I can expect. And you don't need to make a logo. You hardly even need to design a logo. You need to design your brand, and the logo comes out of that. So how do you do that? What questions do you need to ask? Which, by the way, I won't make you wait to this. That church that came to us and said, hey, we need a lot of logos, right? We need something that's going to make this board happy. We said, okay, well, here's the deal. We only do 2 at a time, okay? A lot of agencies will do 3. I do 2. My last agency, we did 2. My current agency, we only do 2 at a time because 95% of the time you're going to pick one of those 2. And then if we go back and do 2 more, 95% of that time, you're just going to pick one of the first 2. So it saves everyone money and it saves everyone time for us to just do 2. Although if someone says, hey, I'm going to give you 3, don't argue. I wouldn't argue with that, right? We just know what works best for us and our style. So we had told them, hey, we're only going to do 2. And, if we want to do 2 more, we'll include that in the quote. But if you want to go 2 more above that, you're going to pay for every another 2 because something's not right there. And we're going to have to spend more time in research. And they said, you know what? We understand. We're ready to pay for more. We're ready to pay for additional ones. We'll keep going until we get this right. We want to work with you guys. Nailed it on the first 2. One of the first ones we made, nailed it. That's fun to say too. Nailed it. And God forbid we did not use papyrus. No, we did not. We did not use papyrus on it. But we nailed it in the first 2. And it's thankfully because of the questions that I'm about to share with you right now, because these are questions that a lot of freelance designers don't ask because they're in the business of making like pretty looking things. They're not always in the business. And this is not maliciously, by the way. This is just different set of skills. They're not in the business of making something and digging into your culture, your beliefs, your values, your representation, your people, your community, and then digging out of that or pulling from that what your logo should look like. They just kind of pick something that looks pretty and run with it, right? A lot of designers don't even realize there's 9 different logo types that we went over last week. And then there's typically 6 different font types that will traditionally accompany those logos. Not 6 different fonts, 6 different font types, which can then lead up to 500 different types of fonts. So a lot that you need to do, a lot that you need to know going into making a church logo, which is why I recommend don't make your own church logo unless you have significant branding and logo design experience. We even had a pastor, man, I'm just telling stories all day. We even had a pastor tell us that they couldn't afford us. They were going to make it on their own. And I said, that's fine. Send me your first few ideas. We'll at least help you guys. My goal is always to help your church and support your church, whether we make a dime on it or not. Most of our content, most of our consulting, most of our discovery is free. And we will give you that roadmap, whether you work with us or not. That's just my heart. And that's just what I want to bring to the table. Now they sent me a couple logos and I was like, this is way off. This is not what you told me you wanted. This is not what I think you need. This is not what we talked about, the direction you need to go. And even though they had design experience, I'm going to stop playing with that coin, design experience, even though they had that, it wasn't a perfect match for what the church needed, right? And so, this is why it's very important. This is why I believe in the agency model. I used to not believe it when I was a freelancer, and then I realized the importance and the tremendous value that an agency model can bring, which is multiple specialists. So there are specialists that focus on urban designs. There are specialists that work on more traditional designs, bleeding edge design specialists. I even got a guy that specializes in putting crosses. If you got to have a cross in your logo, this guy will make it look good, right? So I'm really excited to know him and be able to utilize him for my clients. But you got to ask, I'm going to give you these 5 questions here. Let's just jump into it. You've got to ask these 5 questions, and I'm going to even give you a bonus one to start with, that if you don't have these questions, you're making a pretty logo, but you're not making an asset to your church's redesign, rebrand efforts. Okay. So you need to ask these 5 questions. And I'm going to tell you right now, it has nothing to do with the actual visualness of the design of the logo. This will drive you in the direction you want to go. Okay. So I'm not saying, hey, pick what state you want to go to. That's what a lot of the designers will ask. What colors do you want? What elements do you want? Do you want it wide? Do you want it tall? Right? The answer is actually both. That's the equivalent of saying, like, I'm going to take a road trip. What state do I want to go to? No. You got to back out even further. Okay. You got to ask, do I want to go somewhere warm? Do I want to go somewhere cold? Do I want to go somewhere international? Do I want to go somewhere with my family, by myself? Those different things will determine what kind of trip you take. And so we need to take a step back and not say, what state do we want to go to or what city do we want to go to? We need to take a step back and just say, what kind of climate do I want to go to? Do I want to go by myself or do I want to go with other people? Right? So I'm going to give you, I titled this 5 questions to ask when creating a new church logo. I'm actually going to give you a bonus one right off the bat because I realize that this is actually a question you should ask in the pre-design stage and even before you get to the point where you're asking these 5 questions. So I'm going to give you a bonus question and I'm going to start it off with this. Who other than yourself needs to be involved in the decision-making process for your logo? I'm going to say that again. Who other than yourself needs to be involved? You can tell I've said this multiple times. Who else other than yourself needs to be involved in the decision-making process on what to continue with on the logo, how the project's going to go? Okay. The first church just decided, and I think they're right. There only needs to be 1 or 2 people in the decision-making process. They decided to go ahead and decide to pick a logo. We'll call it logo F. And then they go to launch it with the church. And then the board is like, no, we don't like that logo. It's missing certain things and it's a problem. And God bless them. For the sake of church unity, they decided to humbly accept their request and go back to the drawing board. And that's when they came to us. And we had a new set of rules and a new set of things we need to go along with that. And the reason why we got it on the first try is because we asked these following questions. So you have to know who's going to be involved. There is no reason you need to be talking to a designer or talking with an agency like myself or a consultant and not have all the decision makers in the room. Okay. So there's some value. I can understand where you're coming from. If you say, well, I'm going to decide and then I'm going to take it to the board. The problem is you're adding a lot of fluff, right? The board just needs to be there. So don't look at 2 or 3 options and then pick one and take it to the board. The board needs to be there to see those 2 or 3 options. I mean, that's just what it is. If they're going to be decision makers, they need to be a decision maker. If you just want to run it by for their approval, they're a decision maker. They need to be in on that decision-making process, and they need to be a part of this questionnaire, a part of the survey, because they need to know what the logo should do. Because again, you can ask these questions among a pastor like yourself, but the board will deny it because they don't understand the actual vision, the actual reason why the church's logo is redesigned this way. So we need to really focus on that. And a lot of times the board, and this is such a hard thing about working with churches, he said with a large smile on his face if you're not watching the video, is the church board is not the primary target for the logo. The logo is not necessarily made to communicate to the 3, 5, 7, 9, 12 members of the board. It's made to communicate with the community. Sometimes the church board is not an accurate representation of the community. And so it can be tough to sell that logo. And when I say sell, I mean like convince them or have them on the same page to sell that logo to the board when the board's like, well, I don't like this. And you have to say, well, it's not for you, right? So, it's really, it's a tough sell. So they need to be really in on this process from the beginning, including asking these questions. So bonus question we'll call it number 0. Who else other than yourself needs to be involved in the decision-making process of how this logo moves forward? All right, let's get to the actual meat of it. The 5 questions you need to ask when creating a new church logo. Question number 1, if you could only tell the world 5 things about your church, what are the 5 most important things you would say? All right. Now, going forward, we're just going to stick with like, hey, this is just you, pastor. If there is a board, then everyone's answers need to be taken into consideration and discussed, which is why if the board's going to be a decision maker process, I would ask them, make the decision of who's going to make this call, and don't argue with them once we make this call. Okay. It's very easy for people to overstep boundaries with creative because we don't see it as a physical asset. We don't see it as a wall that gets knocked down and it's irreversible. It's a logo. Just make it again. Okay. But you really need to answer this question. If you could only tell the world 5 things about your church, what would those 5 things be? And this is only 5 things. Now, I'm not asking you to make a bullet point. I'm not asking you to list your 5 core values, okay? If someone said, hey, tell me about your church, you would not tell them, oh, well, we love Jesus, we love people, we love serving, and we meet at 5 o'clock. No, like, it's kind of weird, right? It's true, but it's not like, if I could only tell you 5 things, what would those 5 things be? Got a message from the wife. There we go. So you figure out what those 5 things are. This is like, imagine you meet me at a grocery store. I don't know you. I don't know Jesus, if that's your target audience. And when I say target audience, I mean the people you're called to serve. Don't take offense, Pastor. And I can only tell you 5 things. What 5 things would I tell you? Well, about my church, I would say, hey, Jesus is Lord. He's Savior. He loves you. And the best way to get to know him is to be around other people. Okay, that's 2 things. The best way to be around other people is not sitting on a pew in a building. It's be in a home with someone else, eating and having a good time and learning together. And then it's important to not only just be a viewer, it's important to be an active participant in your faith, and it's okay to ask questions. That's 4. And so, I would encourage you to come with me and come check out my home group. I almost said be a part, and I wouldn't say that right off the bat. I would say, come check out a home group and come meet with us on Sunday afternoons, right? 5 things. That's it. All right. Bye. What is that person going to know about my church? What is expected of them? And what makes us different from all the other churches that are around, right? What's going to communicate to that person that's going to get them to take a next step? And what is that next step? So those are the 5 things, right? So we're not like, okay, well, we got to have the service times in our logo. No, I'm just saying, what are the 5 things? Because those 5 things are going to be different. Some churches will tell me, number 1 is the Bible is the single authority that you need to listen to. Number 2, the authority is best communicated from the pastor from the pulpit. Number 3, the groups support the pastor's preaching from the pulpit. Reading from papyrus. And, that is why we have such an intense group culture that is, we stay on 1 lesson a week, right? Like that's, really figure out what those 5 things are, because that's going to really guide, where does the logo fit in on that? It really guides kind of like, okay, well, one of those 5 might be the one thing we want people to recognize about the church. So if community is very important, there's ways that we can represent community through a logo, or through your identity in the way that we present your logo to the public. So what we don't want to do is put like a foofy dove, right? What does that do for your church? Nothing. It just makes the board happy. Picking on your board, if you're part of the church board, God bless you. You have an integral role, and I understand if you're an elder board, whatever. I'm picking on you because you guys honestly give me a hard time. So I'm going to give you a hard time in this show. I love you, and that's why I'm going to give you a hard time. So, what does a dove have to do with that? Well, it looks pretty. Well, it doesn't communicate any of these 5 things that we want it to do. Now, you're not going to find one image that communicates all of this. However, you can find something that fits in along with the following questions we're going to ask. This kind of sets the table. Not only, you don't want to just set the table on decision makers, you want to set the table of, all right, this is what this logo is really supposed to do. It's supposed to visually communicate this message to the people. And the message, yes, we have our one-liner. Yes, we have our story brand framework. If we only had 5 things to say, though, what would those 5 things be? The one-liner might be one of them. Then you got 4 other things. What are you going to say? Children are very important. Families are very important. We don't forget the elderly, right? That tells me you're a generational church. So whatever we design needs to be accessible throughout multiple generations. It needs to be something traditional, something classic, something that stands the test of time. Okay? Which also means your logo might be a little corporate looking, because corporations, their logo and identity are supposed to be intergenerational. So you won't want to go with something uber traditional, and you don't want to go with something bleeding edge modern, because you're going to miss those people in between. Right? So you want to be accessible. This doesn't mean you don't want to be focused. You want to be accessible. Okay? So if you can only tell the world 5 things about your church, what are the 5 things you would say? All right. Question 2, what kind of personality do you want your church to express? And when I say what kind of personality you want to express, I mean, like, how do you want to be perceived? Okay. A couple of examples here. Serious. We're a serious church. We take God serious. The gospel is serious. We're as serious as a heart attack. And that's pretty serious if you don't know Jesus. Or do you want to be a fun church? Hey, we're a fun church. We don't take ourselves lightly. We take Jesus seriously, but we don't take ourselves lightly. We have a lot of fun events. We believe that people disciple best in relationships, and the best relationships start through fun activities. So we're fun. We don't take ourselves. Are you a youthful church, right? God forbid you go to our church in a suit, you're going to be ostracized, and you'll feel like what it's like when we go to your church in a t-shirt and shorts and sandals, right? We're a youthful church. We allow caps in our service. We talk slang. We don't talk correctly. That's okay, right? Or are you a mature church? Maybe mature doesn't necessarily have to mean serious, right? But we are elder led. We are respectful. We observe certain things in service that are respectful of the elements and our history and our traditions. So serious, fun, youthful, mature, lighthearted. What is the personality that you want your church to express? If your church was a person, I like to ask this as a follow-up question. Here's a second bonus question. If your church was a member at Thanksgiving dinner, what family member would it be? This is a fun question that you either get or you don't. And I've only had one person not understand this question. For example, my church would be the fun uncle. It would be the one that, you can have a good time with, but if things get tough in life, you can call him to bail you out of jail. The fun uncle. I had someone tell me that their church is the wise grandma. It's someone that you can sit down, play a nice board game with, that'll pick you up from school and is always there for you and always has just something to lift your spirits and something to let you know everything's going to be okay. And I had one church tell me older brother, right? They have a lot of expectations. And they're learning as they go. However, they feel that they've been where you have, and therefore, there's someone to listen to when times get tough, right? So this is a fun little bonus question. And it's more of a mental exercise than anything that's going to help, but it gets you in that right framework. If your church was a member at Thanksgiving dinner, what family member would they be? Just a fun little question. All right, here's my favorite question. This is also the hardest one, and if you have an hour-long meeting to discuss your logo and ask these 5 questions, this question is going to take up 40 minutes of it, and it's a good thing, okay? Question number 4. If you had to describe your church as an image, what would that image be? Okay. Now, I don't mean like a big, beautiful building or a see-through pulpit with a nice black man as the preacher, right? Like that's like if I was to go into your church and take a picture, that's what I would see. What I want is something a little bit more like what's the ideal snapshot of your church that if someone only saw that picture, and even if it's not existing right now, if it's something like maybe a snapshot, a static image of your vision, what would that be? And it could be, it's a picture of a map. And from one location, there's multiple routes that go to other locations in the U.S. And at those locations, there's pictures of people's living room with one group praying and one group, watching the Bible study and one group breaking bread, several groups breaking bread. One group's not even in their living room. They're out running a food table out in the neighborhood. And another group's having a barbecue in the neighborhood. Like that's kind of the overall image of what I think our church should be. I had another one say, it's about 400 people and it's all believers and they're all in groups, and some groups are praying. One group is laying on hands. Another group is passing out groceries. Another group has just one guy paying another guy, like he's just giving cash to that guy. And another group is laying on hands and healing. And another group is reading the Bible. One guy's like talking through. This is not an image you will ever get at this person's church. However, it expresses the desire of what the feeling should be at that church. Okay, another church told me, hey, our image is actually our sanctuary, but there's all kinds of people. There's white people and black people and brown people, young and old, and they've all got their hands risen in worship, and not a single soul has their eye open. They're all eyes closed in deep, heartful worship, and the stage is empty. Whew. I got chills. Let's still tell that story. A group of people that no matter their background, race, or creed, are all focused on Christ, not the things around them, hands raised in worship, and there's not even anyone leading them. They're leading themselves. Powerful stuff. So if you had to describe your church as an image, what would that image be? And what this does is it helps kind of in your mind's eye, and I don't like using that phrase, but I don't have a better word for it. In your mind's eye, it's like, this is when people see our logo, this is what I want them to think of. Okay. And let me tell you this, this is not going to happen in a few years. Okay. If you look at the Coca-Cola logo, you might, I see a baseball game. Some people might see a beach, right? Oh, the Corona beer, right? If you see a Corona beer, you might just picture a beach, right? Those beach commercials. What's another example? iPhones. If you see the Apple logo, you're going to see hip, trendy people. And if you see the Android logo, you're going to see, business people, or maybe someone that's more wise with their money. The branding is what creates the image. But questions like this, describe your church as an image, helps you kind of picture like, well, when someone sees our logo, this is what I want them to think of. And again, if you're just making a pretty church logo with just a cross and a nice word that says Bill and Ted's Excellent Church, how does that reflect the image of all hands up, eyes closed, heads bowed, worshiping with no one leading them, all under their own, all on their own, right? Like, that's huge. And just a simple cross. I mean, there's like, I'm not saying a cross in your name's a bad idea, but does it represent and does it signify that you are a church intent on showing people how to take control of their own lives and live their own faith and work it through to the point where they no longer rely on others to answer all those questions, but they can figure it out themselves and then join with others in that praise and fellowship? How does A signify B? And if it doesn't, then yeah, there's something else missing. There's something else that you have to do. Question number 5. Did I skip one? I think I skipped one. I think I went 1, 2, 3. Yeah, so that was question number 3. My bad. Question number 4. What kind of brands do your people already like? Okay. Now, in previous shows, if you have not listened to my first 2 episodes, when we talk about messaging, this isn't going to make a lot of sense. Okay. But your church is uniquely equipped to uniquely reach a unique group of people. You'll hear me say that a lot. I really, truly believe that. And because you're uniquely equipped to uniquely reach a unique group of people, your church is speaking to a particular type of person, whether that's blue collar, white collar, families, singles, young people, old people. That's fine. Boomers. If you're a boomer church, some of my favorite churches are boomer churches. Like, what kind of brands do they already resonate with? And if brands, certain colors, certain fonts, certain styles, certain imagery, certain iconography, certain design, visual elements, if certain things are already resonating with them, don't reinvent the wheel, lean into that, right? That's what you need to really look at, is what's already resonating with them. And then how can we come alongside and not join the noise, but utilize the elements that are already communicating with them? Just like I wouldn't ask you, an English preacher, to move into a Korean neighborhood and start trying to preach to them in English. They need someone that speaks Korean. Send a Korean ministry, or tell them to go to the plant a Korean speaking church there, right? So what you don't want to do is you don't want to go into this area of unique people and not speak their language, and not use something that's going to catch their eye. Worst case, you're going to use something that's not in their visual language, their visual vocabulary, as we call it, and you're going to be totally unseen, even though that's the people that you're really wanting to reach, but they look at you and they're like, that looks like an old church. Same thing with the website, same thing with our language, right? Knowing those questions. If you don't know who you're equipped to serve, go back and watch those first 2 episodes of mine. It's the very first foundational thing that any work we do at Nava Church Marketing that we start with, because that will determine what you do after. Okay. And the last question, now this is where we actually start to get into like the nitty gritty, but this is a question that you need to ask. Okay, certain elements, design elements, what do you like and what do you need to avoid? Okay, so, or what does it need to have and what do you need to avoid? So I need to get going soon because I have a meeting coming to my actual door. But okay. So the board, the church that I told you at the beginning, they needed to have a cross in the logo. Period. It's integral to our faith. We must have it in our logo. Do it or else. Okay. Sucks that you're in that position, but you need to know that before you go into something like this. Okay. It might also be, I had a client tell me last week, I don't want a cross in my logo. Perfect. We need to know what you want and don't want. And then also anything else specific in mind to avoid, such as colors or such as font types, right? We used a handwritten font before and we don't want to use that again. We feel like it might be too similar. Or we like it because it's familiar. Everyone knows us as that church, so let's lean into it, right? You need to ask the question, what needs to stay, what needs to go, what needs to be embraced, and what needs to be avoided. Okay, those are the 5 questions. If you can only, let me recap them here. If you can only tell the world 5 things about your church, what are the 5 most important things you would say? Number 2, what kind of personality do you want your church to express? Bonus question, if your church was a family member at Thanksgiving dinner, what family member would they be? Question number 3, if you had to describe your church as an image, what would that image be? My favorite question. And the one that really leans us into what the logo should look like. And by the way, the church that I spoke to last week, I'm going to be unveiling their logo on social media once we finish the revisions this week. So if you want to see what that looks like, they're the church that said, well, it's 400 people, but they're all in groups and they're all doing different things. They're not one church. They're all just groups of people living out their faith. It's very cool. You actually see some of that from the logo. What brands do, question number 4, what brands are already resonating with the people you're called to serve, and what elements can you utilize without having to reinvent the wheel? And then number 5, the obligatory, what elements do you need? What elements do you need to avoid? Okay. This is kind of daunting. And like I said at the very beginning of the show, Pastor, the logo is not something you should do unless you have previous logo and branding experience. Okay. Not just previous design experience, logo and branding experience. So if that's not you, what you need to do is give us a call, 832-861-7654. You'll hear the number at the end of this, or go to our website, navachurchmarketing.com. If you are not a pastor, or if you're a pastor with these experience, ask these 5 questions to the people that are in charge of the logo, whether that's your board, whether that's yourself. Even if you're like, well, I want to run it through a couple of people, those people need to be involved here because they will give you insight into things that you had not thought about yourself. And if you try to do this and run it by their approval, you're going to be missing a lot. And you need more than their approval. If you want their approval, you also need their input, period. When it comes to logo design, period. If you need their input, if you need their approval, you're also going to want their input. So give us a call. We'll do all this for you so you can focus on ministry, because every minute you're sitting behind the computer, let me say that again. Every minute you're sitting behind the computer, designing a logo, you're not standing out in front of people doing what God's called you to do. And I believe that it's my job to do what God's called me to do and my team to do, which is take that off your plate so you can do what God's called you to do. Okay. A great example, like I said, the church I talked to last week, we did their logo. We're in the revisions phase right now. We've got the concept. He told me, all groups of people, all living out their faith. What the 5 most important things, you are loved. We want to love you. We want to serve you. There's more to life than everything else around you. Okay. Personality. They're the church that told me older brother. Okay. Colors in mind, no specific colors, things to avoid. We don't want to cross. Okay. So we already, like, that right there told me more about what the logo should look like and what it should be. And the cool thing is he already kind of had a concept in mind, which we can call it divine revelation, or we can just call it a good guess. I don't care. And we just had to make it look good. He was using like some clip art version of it. So really what we did was we took what he already had, filter it through the answers to these questions to get to a logo that, he was very excited when he saw it. I was very excited when I saw it. And of the 2 concepts that we took over, he ended up picking the one that I wouldn't have picked, but that's great. This is his church. He's the shepherd. The sheep hear his voice. when he calls upon them. So he knows what kind of voice, what kind of imagery that will respond to them. So fun stuff. So this is stuff that we're doing and we're practicing every day. In fact, tonight we have another pre-branding survey. Well, I will be asking these questions plus probably another, I think we've got a total of 11 questions that we ask in our pre-branding survey. Yeah, 11. So I'm very excited to ask those questions. But these are the top 5 plus the 2 bonus ones that I gave you. So thank you guys for watching. I appreciate you guys. We should be back live all throughout June. I have no trips planned in June. It's a busy month for our family, so I will be here live. But if you leave a comment down below, wherever you're watching this, leave a comment, leave a like, all that good stuff. Subscribe to YouTube, subscribe to the podcast, follow us on Facebook, wherever you're watching this. You know, I want to not only encourage you to take action, to have unreasonable, outrageous, man, now I'm just getting ahead of myself, outrageous vision, unreasonable action, and relentless pursuit. I want you to have all those things, but also, you know, your feedback is going to be very important to us in anything that we do going forward. So if we're not addressing something specifically, if we can't answer it for you, if we can't do it for you, we will point you in the direction to go. And so be a part of that conversation. Be a part of the community that we're building. I know everyone talks about that, and I'm not here to set out to make a community. If it happens, it happens. What I am here to do is to get you, pastor, back in a ministry, back in front of people, not behind a computer screen. And we've got the specialists to do that. And we're going to run you through, if you haven't watched that first episode, the definitive church marketing method, go watch that. I will tell you everything that we can help you do to reach 10 times more people. Thank you guys for watching. Go out, do whatever it takes to become the best known organization in your community.
That's going to do it for today's episode of the Best Known Church Show with Justin Nava. Be sure to subscribe to stay updated on the latest news, strategies, and resources that you need to reach 10x more people and become the best known in your community. To send us a message or leave a voicemail for Justin to be played on a future show, visit thebestknownchurchshow.com. And if you'd like to work with us so you can focus on your ministry, give us a call at 832-861-7654. Until next time, stay outrageous.